He killed a lion with his bare hands, tearing it apart like paper. He slaughtered 1,000 armed soldiers using nothing but the jawbone of a donkey. He ripped the gates off an entire city, posts, bars, and all, and carried them 40 miles uphill to the top of a mountain just to prove he could. When his enemies tied him with brand new ropes thick enough to hold an ox, he flexed once and the ropes exploded off his arms like they were made of thread. They tried to trap him in a locked building. He tore the doors off. They sent armies. He destroyed them. For 20 years, no weapon, no prison, no force on earth could stop him. And yet this man, Samson, the strongest human being who ever walked the planet, a man whose power came directly from God, was brought down not by an army, not by a weapon, but by a woman he could not resist. She did what 1,000 soldiers could not. She asked him one question, over and over, until he broke. And when he finally told her the secret, when he gave up the one thing he should have protected above all else, she waited until he fell asleep in her lap, called in a servant with a razor, and took everything from him. They gouged out his eyes. They chained him to a grinding stone like an animal. And when they finally brought him into their temple to mock him, blind and broken and enslaved, he prayed one more time for strength, wrapped his arms around the 2 central pillars holding up the roof, and pulled. The entire building, 3,000 people, the lords of the Philistines, priests, soldiers, spectators, came crashing down. Samson killed more people in his death than in his entire life. This is Sovereign Path, and today we're telling the story of Samson, not the Sunday school version, not the sanitized myth, but the real story of a man who had unlimited power and one fatal weakness, and how that weakness destroyed him and everyone around him. This is the story of what happens when you cannot control your desire, even when you possess the strength of God himself. Samson's story begins before his birth, in a time when Israel was occupied by the Philistines, a technologically advanced enemy who had iron weapons while the Israelites still fought with bronze. The Philistines had ruled over Israel for 40 years. The people had given up resisting. They had accepted subjugation as normal. Into this defeated culture, an angel appeared to a barren woman from the tribe of Dan and told her she would bear a son who would begin to deliver Israel from the Philistines. But there were conditions. The child was to be a Nazirite from birth, set apart for God's service his entire life. The Nazirite vow had 3 requirements: never drink wine or strong drink, never touch a dead body, and never cut your hair. The uncut hair was the visible sign of the vow, the symbol that this person belonged to God. The woman's husband, Manoah, was terrified when he heard this. He prayed for the angel to return and give them more specific instructions on how to raise this special child. The angel came back and repeated the same message: your son will be a Nazirite, consecrated to God, and he will begin to free Israel. That word, begin, is important. Samson would not finish the job. He would start something he could not complete. And the reason would become devastatingly clear: Samson grew up knowing he was different. He was stronger than other boys, faster, more aggressive. The Spirit of the Lord would come upon him at random moments, filling him with a power that was not his own. But Samson, despite being chosen by God and blessed with supernatural gifts, had a problem that would define his entire life: he could not control his sexual desire. It ruled him. It drove every major decision he made. And every time he followed it, disaster followed. The first disaster happened when Samson was a young man and saw a Philistine woman in the town of Timnah. He went home and told his parents, "I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah, now get her for me as my wife." His parents were horrified. "Is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives, or among all our people, that you must go to take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines?" Samson's response was blunt and revealing: "Get her for me, for she is right in my eyes." Not, "She is a good woman." Not, "I love her." "She is right in my eyes." She pleased him. He wanted her. That was enough. His parents did not know, the text tells us, that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. God would use Samson's lust to strike at Israel's enemies. But that does not make the lust itself righteous. It makes it a weapon, a dangerous, uncontrolled weapon that God would redirect toward his purposes despite Samson's inability to master himself. On the way to Timnah to arrange the marriage, Samson encountered a young lion. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him with power, and he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, killing it instantly. The text says he ripped it as one tears a young goat. No effort. No struggle. Supernatural strength flowing through him like electricity. But here's the critical detail: Samson did not tell his father or mother what he had done. He kept it secret. Why? Because he had touched a dead body, the lion's corpse, which violated his Nazirite vow. Even in this moment of miraculous power, Samson was already breaking the rules that were supposed to define him. Later, when he returned to marry the woman, he passed by the lion's carcass and found that bees had made a hive in it. He scooped out honey and ate it, again violating the prohibition against touching dead things, and again said nothing about it. This pattern, power from God combined with secret violations of the vow, would repeat throughout his life. The wedding to the Philistine woman went forward. Samson threw a 7-day feast, which certainly involved wine, another violation of his vow. During the feast, he made a bet with 30 Philistine groomsmen. If they could solve a riddle, he would give them 30 sets of fine clothes. If they failed, they would give him 30 sets. The riddle was based on the lion and the honey. Out of the eater came something to eat, out of the strong came something sweet. The Philistines could not solve it. So they threatened Samson's new wife, telling her they would burn her and her father's house unless she got the answer from Samson. She cried and pleaded with him for 7 days. "You hate me," she said. "You do not really love me. You have given a riddle to my people, and you have not told it to me." And Samson, unable to resist her emotional manipulation, told her. She immediately told the Philistines. On the 7th day, just before sunset, they gave him the answer. Samson knew he had been betrayed. He was enraged. And in that rage, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him again. He went down to Ashkelon, killed 30 Philistine men, took their clothes, gave them to the groomsmen to settle the bet, and returned home in fury. His wife was given to another man. Samson's desire for a foreign woman had led to betrayal, murder, and the collapse of his marriage, all within 7 days, but Samson was not done with her. Some time later, he returned to Timnah with a young goat as a gift, intending to visit his wife. Her father told him, "I really thought you utterly hated her, so I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister more beautiful than she? Please take her instead." Samson responded with cold fury, "This time I shall be innocent in regard to the Philistines when I do them harm." He went out and caught 300 foxes, tied them tail to tail in pairs, fastened torches to their tails, set the torches on fire, and released them into the Philistine grain fields. The fire destroyed the standing grain, the vineyards, and the olive groves. The Philistines, realizing Samson had done this because his wife had been given to another man, burned her and her father to death in retaliation. Samson then attacked them, hip and thigh with a great blow, killing many, and went to hide in a cave. His lust for one woman had now resulted in economic devastation, mass murder, and the death of the woman herself. The Philistines responded by sending an army to the tribe of Judah, demanding that Samson be handed over. 3,000 men from Judah went to Samson and said, "Do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? What then is this that you have done to us?" Samson's answer is telling, "As they did to me, so have I done to them." This was personal. This was revenge. This was not about freeing Israel. This was about Samson's wounded pride and uncontrolled rage. The men of Judah, terrified of Philistine retaliation, agreed to bind Samson and hand him over, as long as they promised not to kill him themselves. Samson agreed. They bound him with 2 new ropes and led him out to the Philistine army. When the Philistines saw him bound and helpless, they rushed toward him shouting in triumph. And then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson in power. The ropes on his arms snapped like burnt thread. He looked around for a weapon and saw the fresh jawbone of a donkey lying on the ground. He picked it up, and what happened next is almost beyond belief. He killed 1,000 men with that jawbone. 1,000. Not in multiple battles over months or years. In one encounter. In one afternoon. Using a piece of bone from a dead animal. The text says he struck them down, and afterward Samson himself boasted, with the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey I have struck down 1,000 men. The battlefield must have been a nightmare of bodies piled on bodies, blood soaking into the ground, survivors fleeing in terror, and in the middle of it all, one man holding a bone, breathing hard, surrounded by death. After this, Samson became desperately thirsty. And God split open a rock so water flowed out, saving his life. And for 20 years after that, Samson judged Israel. He was respected, feared, and powerful. But he never changed. He never learned. Some time later, Samson went to Gaza, a Philistine city, and saw a prostitute there. He went in to her. When the people of Gaza heard that Samson was in the city, they surrounded the place and waited at the gate all night, planning to kill him in the morning. Samson lay with the prostitute until midnight, then rose, took hold of the doors of the city gate and the 2 posts, pulled them up, bar and all, and put them on his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that is in front of Hebron, which is about 40 miles away. Imagine the scene: a man carrying an entire city gate, wood, iron, stone posts, hundreds of pounds, up a mountain in the middle of the night just to humiliate his enemies. This was not strategy. This was not liberation. This was Samson showing off, proving that he could do whatever he wanted, go wherever he wanted, sleep with whoever he wanted, and no one could stop him. And he was right. No one could stop him. Except himself. After this, Samson fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek whose name was Delilah. The lords of the Philistines came to her and said, "Seduce him, and see where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to humble him. And we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver. 1,100 pieces of silver from each of the 5 Philistine lords, that's 5,500 pieces of silver total, an enormous fortune." Delilah agreed. She was not Samson's wife. She was not even pretending to love him for his sake. She was a paid agent working for his enemies. And Samson knew it. Because what happened next makes that clear. Delilah asked Samson, "Please tell me where your great strength lies, and how you might be bound, that one could subdue you." Samson lied to her. He told her, "If they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, then I shall become weak and be like any other man." So Delilah got 7 fresh bowstrings, and while Samson slept, men hid in the room with her. She tied him up and then shouted, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." He woke, snapped the bowstrings like thread, and the hidden men fled. Delilah complained, "Behold, you have mocked me and told me lies. Please tell me how you might be bound." Samson lied again. "If they bind me with new ropes that have not been used, then I shall become weak and be like any other man." She did it. She tied him with new ropes. She shouted the alarm. He broke free easily. Again. She asked again. He lied again. "If you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web and fasten it tight with the pin, then I shall become weak and be like any other man." She did it. Same result. He broke free. 3 times Delilah tried to betray him. 3 times men hid in the room ready to capture him. 3 times Samson lied to her and broke free when she sprung the trap. He knew exactly what she was doing. And yet he kept going back to her. He kept sleeping in her house. He kept letting her tie him up. Why? Because he could not control his desire for her. Because he believed his strength made him invincible. Because he thought he could keep playing this game forever. Then Delilah shifted tactics. The text says she pressed him hard with her words day after day, and urged him, until his soul was vexed to death. She nagged him. She cried. She accused him of not really loving her. She made his life miserable with constant emotional pressure. And Samson, the man who could kill 1,000 soldiers, could not withstand the emotional manipulation of one woman who was openly trying to destroy him. He broke. He told her everything. A razor has never come upon my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If my head is shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. Finally, the truth. Delilah knew it was real this time because, the text says, she saw that he had told her all his heart. She sent word to the Philistine lords, "Come up again, for he has told me all his heart." They came, bringing the money with them. She made Samson sleep on her lap, called in a man, and had him shave off the 7 locks of Samson's hair. Then she began to torment him, and his strength left him. She cried out, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." He woke up and thought, "I will go out as at other times and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had left him. The Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, brought him down to Gaza, bound him with bronze shackles, and made him grind grain in the prison like an animal. The strongest man who ever lived, blinded and enslaved, doing the work of an ox. His hair had been the symbol of his covenant with God, the visible sign that he was set apart. By revealing the secret to Delilah, by allowing her to cut it, he had finally broken the one part of the vow he had not yet violated. And God withdrew the power. But the text includes a small detail that the Philistines did not notice: the hair of his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. The symbol was returning. The vow, perhaps, was being renewed. And Samson, blind and broken, grinding in the dark, had time to think. Time to reflect on what his lack of self-control had cost him. Time, maybe, to repent. The Philistines held a great festival to their god Dagon, celebrating their victory over Samson. 3,000 men and women filled the temple, including all the lords of the Philistines. They called for Samson to be brought out so they could mock him. A young boy led the blind Samson by the hand into the temple. They made him perform for them, humiliating him for their entertainment. After a time, Samson said to the boy who held his hand, "Let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, that I may lean against them." The temple was built with 2 central pillars supporting the entire roof. Samson stood between them, placed one hand on each, and prayed. This is the only recorded prayer of Samson in the entire narrative. "O Lord God, please remember me and please strengthen me only this once, O God, that I may be avenged on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." He was not praying for Israel's freedom. He was not praying for God's glory. He was praying for revenge. But God answered. Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines," and he pushed with all his might. The pillars gave way. The roof collapsed. 3,000 people died instantly: the lords of the Philistines, the priests of Dagon, the soldiers, the spectators, everyone. And Samson died with them. The text says, "So the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those whom he had killed during his life." So what do we learn from Samson? What does his story mean for men walking the sovereign path today? First, understand this: strength without self-control is not power. It is a curse. Samson had strength that came directly from God, strength that made him physically unstoppable. But he could not control his desire. He could not walk past a woman who pleased his eyes. He could not resist emotional manipulation. He could not protect the secret that his enemies needed most. And because of that lack of internal discipline, all his external strength meant nothing. He ended his life blind, enslaved, and dead in the rubble of his final act of revenge. Real power is not the ability to destroy your enemies. Real power is the ability to master yourself. If you cannot control your own impulses, then no amount of physical strength, wealth, or talent will save you from destruction. You will hand your enemies the weapon they need to destroy you, just as Samson handed Delilah the razor. Second, recognize that your greatest strength and your greatest weakness are often connected. Samson's strength came from his Nazirite vow, which included the requirement never to cut his hair. But his weakness, his inability to resist women, led him to reveal that secret. The thing that made him powerful was also the thing he could not protect because he lacked the discipline to walk away from Delilah. For modern men, this often manifests as a connection between sexual energy and creative or professional power. The same drive that makes you ambitious, charismatic, and successful is the drive that, if undisciplined, will lead you into affairs, addictions, or decisions that destroy everything you have built. You cannot simply suppress this energy. But you must master it. You must redirect it. You must build the internal boundaries that Samson never developed. If Samson had practiced semen retention, if he had channeled his sexual energy into his mission rather than dissipating it with Philistine women and prostitutes and Delilah, he might have completed what he was born to do, deliver Israel. Instead, he only began. He started something he never finished because he could not control himself. Third, understand that emotional manipulation is a weapon more dangerous than any physical force. 3 times Delilah tried to betray Samson. 3 times he escaped easily. But when she switched from physical traps to emotional pressure, when she cried, when she accused him of not loving her, when she made his life unbearable with constant nagging, he broke. Samson could withstand armies. He could not withstand a woman's tears and accusations. This is not a statement about women. This is a warning about your own vulnerability. If you are a man who craves approval, who cannot stand being accused of not caring enough, who will do anything to make someone stop crying or stop complaining, you are vulnerable to this exact manipulation. And the people who want to destroy you, whether that is a romantic partner, a business rival, or a political enemy, will find your emotional weak point and exploit it until you give them what they need. Sovereignty means being able to say no even when someone you desire is begging you to say yes. Even when they are crying. Even when they are accusing you of being heartless. If you cannot do that, you are not sovereign. You are enslaved by your need for approval. Fourth, recognize that every time you violate your principles in small ways, you weaken your ability to stand firm when it matters most. Samson violated his Nazirite vow repeatedly throughout his life. He touched the lion's corpse. He ate honey from a dead body. He drank wine at the wedding feast. He touched countless dead bodies of his enemies. Each time, nothing happened. He still had his strength. So he assumed the vow did not really matter. But each violation made it easier to violate it again. Each compromise weakened his sense that these boundaries were sacred. By the time Delilah asked him to reveal the secret of his hair, he had already spent years treating his vow as irrelevant. The final betrayal, letting her cut his hair, was not a sudden departure from his character. It was the inevitable conclusion of decades of small compromises. If you want to be a man who can withstand pressure when it matters, you must practice discipline when it does not seem to matter. You must honor your own rules even when breaking them appears to have no consequences. Because the consequences are always there. They accumulate. They weaken you. And when the real test comes, you will fail because you have spent years training yourself to compromise. Fifth, understand that God can use your failures for His purposes, but that does not justify the failures themselves. The text tells us that God was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines through Samson's desire for the woman in Timnah. God used Samson's lust to create conflict that weakened Israel's oppressors. But Samson's lust was still a flaw. The woman still ended up dead. Samson still caused unnecessary suffering. God can work with broken tools. He can redirect your mistakes toward outcomes that serve a larger purpose. But that does not mean you should remain a broken tool. The goal is not to trust that God will clean up your messes. The goal is to become the kind of man who does not create messes in the first place. Samson was chosen by God, blessed with supernatural power, and used to accomplish real victories against the Philistines. But he never became the man he was meant to be. He never delivered Israel. He only began. Do not settle for being a man whom God uses despite your flaws. Strive to become a man whom God uses because of your discipline. Finally, understand that there is mercy even at the end. Samson's final prayer was selfish. It was about revenge, not about God's glory. But God answered it. God gave him strength one more time. In his death, Samson accomplished more than he had in his entire life. He destroyed the leadership of the Philistines, struck a blow that would weaken their grip on Israel, and died not as a slave grinding grain but as a warrior bringing down the house of his enemies. This is grace. This is mercy. Even for a man who wasted his gifts, who failed to master himself, who died because of his own weakness, even for him, God granted one final moment of power. If you have spent your life chasing desires you could not control, if you have violated principles you swore to uphold, if you have handed your enemies the tools to destroy you because you could not discipline yourself, it is not too late. The hair grows back. The vow can be renewed. You can choose, even now, even blind and broken, to pray for strength one more time and use it for something greater than yourself. Samson's legacy is not that he was perfect. His legacy is that God used him anyway. And in his final moment, when everything was lost, he chose to act with purpose instead of dying passively in slavery. Samson was the strongest man who ever lived. But strength without discipline is weakness. Power without self-control is bondage. And desire without mastery will destroy you no matter how blessed you are. This is the lesson of Samson. This is the warning for every man who believes his gifts make him invincible. They do not. Master yourself. Or your enemies will not need to defeat you. You will hand them the weapon yourself. If this story moved you, subscribe to Sovereign Path. Share this with a man who needs to hear it. And remember, real strength is not in your muscles. It is in your ability to say no when everything in you wants to say yes.